And today we're going to have a wonderful person sharing the story of Brahma Baba, and it's Sister Manda. Sister Manda is the director of the Brahma Kumaris Global Retreat Centre just outside Oxford. Now, Manda Ben has been practicing Raj Yoga for 40-odd years, yes? Nearly 40 years. But I can tell you one thing, she has literally followed in the footsteps of this pioneer. And I'm delighted to welcome her. So, Sister Manda, please come onto the stage. And she has some wonderful experiences because she's had a lot of connections with individuals who had a direct connection with Brahma Baba. So welcome to Harmony House, Sister Manda. Om Shanti.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to this special occasion, I would say. And thanks to Paramjit Bhai for that wonderful introduction. I'd have to qualify that by saying I've attempted to follow Brahma Baba's footsteps. I can't say that I have totally and completely followed his footsteps. But it is true that if I had to choose one individual from the history who I feel inspires me even today, I would have to say that it's Brahma Baba. The amazing thing, though, is that I never met him. Physically, in this lifetime, I never met him. Yet this incredible feeling that I know him, and that I know him well. Not only that I know him, but the feeling that he knows me. Sometimes even better than I know myself. So anyway, before I begin to share a little bit about Brahma Baba, and perhaps what is the life that he had, and the legacy that he leaves behind for all of us today, I just want to ask, is anybody here for the first time today and don't know anything about the Brahma Kumaris or what happens here? 1, 2. Anybody else? So a special welcome to you all, but I hope that what we share today won't feel too overwhelming for you, in a sense that I understand that today's topic is life and legacy of a pioneer. And if you don't know the Brahma Kumaris, well, it could be anybody that we'd be speaking about. Or we might be speaking about the concept or the theory of a pioneer. But we're focusing specifically on Brahma Baba today. And I'll tell you about that in just a moment. But I'd like to begin with a few moments of silence together, because January is the month in 1969 that Brahma Baba passed away. And although we don't call it passing away, in fact what we really think of it as him, in a sense, moving on to a higher state of being. Physical state of being, limited and perhaps bound by the confines of the physical domain. And yet when our consciousness descends or ascends away from this physical, then we find ourselves in a very powerful state. And we think of Brahma Baba as that, someone who passed into that state, which is even more powerful than being here. In today's world, people are afraid. People are afraid of moving from this physical realm into a more subtle realm, simply because we don't understand it and we don't know it. And yet Brahma Baba was very aware, in a sense, of where exactly he's going, and he's moving away from this physical domain. So we really think of him as having moved on to his higher, elevated state of being. And as such, we celebrate the month of January as the month of silence. While you're seeing all this, you must be wondering, if you've been here before, why is all this? Whether the decorations or this decoration, it's really to create an atmosphere, a vibration and an energy that takes us into a much more silent space automatically, We live in a world of sound. We live in a world of images, texture, color, and very sensual experiences. And while we wish to have more subtle experiences, these physical temptations, if you like, these physical associations that we have are incredibly binding. And so we find it difficult. So to create a special atmosphere, a vibration and an energy that helps us go into that state of silence is a very good thing. And so let's begin with a few moments of silence together. And I'd like you to think about just this, what you feel here. I come here quite regularly. But when this month I arrived earlier in the month and I stepped foot here, I felt the difference in the energy. I really felt that the atmosphere was very conducive, but it naturally drew me inside myself. And I sat here at 5:45 in the morning and I didn't want to move. And so let's see if you can tap into that same vibration and same energy so that when you go home from here, it also pulls you. But for now, let's just settle here. Just sit comfortably and relaxed. Just relax. No need to become tense or, oh my God, what do I have to do? You don't have to do anything. Don't do anything. Just be. Just be present. Just be inside yourself. And sense the energy that is present in the room already. Allow this to help you. Allow this to hold you. Sense the subtlety, but sense the presence. Sense the silence that even as if it speaks to you. What does it tell you? If you were to speak to this and ask this silence, what is it saying to you? It invites you. It invites you to be held in its presence, in the cradle of its vibration. Because ultimately, this is who we are. An energy of peace, an energy of silence. So, pioneers, legacy, life, all of us feel that we come to this world and we live a whole life. We come, but we also know that we have to go. So when you think about, or do you think about, that one day you may not be there as you know yourself today. One day when you're not there, what will you have left behind? would you just have left behind people who are thinking, I'm so glad she's gone. I'm so glad my life is now quiet and peaceful. Or would you leave behind people that say, I really learned something from her or for him? Or that they really enriched my soul in some way? That physically they're not present with me, but I know that their guidance, their love, or my interactions with them have left such an impact on me that in a sense those people never leave you. What kind of a person would you like to have been? What kind of a legacy of yourself would you like to have left behind? It's a question that surely I think we must all ask ourselves. We have to ask ourselves because we have to do what we have to do now. A time will come when it's going to be too late. And so today, when we're speaking about Brahma Baba, you might think, well, he's your Brahma Baba. That he's the Brahma Baba, the founder, the pioneer of the Brahma Kumaris. What is his relevance in my own life? And in sense, if you've been coming here for a while, or however long you've been coming, all that you see here, all that you experience here, all the people that you meet here are the legacy that Brahma Baba leaves behind. Brahma Baba, in a sense, he has his own little story. As I sat today in meditation, just before coming up, we have a little room downstairs, which we call Baba's room. And Baba's room means that it's a room we dedicate for silence and for contemplation and for intense meditation. And Brahma Baba's image sits in front of us in that room. And the reason why it sits in front of us, and I remember for my own self, even today actually, it sits in front of me. There's only one picture I have in my room, and that's a picture of Brahma Baba. Because Brahma Baba's image reminds me of what I must be, how I must live my life. His eyes remind me of what I want my eyes to look like one day. His eyes are filled with such depth of silence. His eyes are filled with God's love or love for God. And those eyes kind of draw you inside yourself. You're looking at his eyes, and that doesn't mean that you're becoming lost in the experience of him, because I didn't know him as an individual, but I know what he did, and I know what he represented. And my own subtle connection with me allows me to have a sense of his personality. So he spent a lot of time in silence. He spent a lot of time in the remembrance of God. And for him, the priority was that the more you spend time in God's remembrance, the more you're able to see your own true self in the perfect image or the mirror of God. Because ultimately, all of us are the same. So we have this room where we sit and meditate. We don't sit and remember Brahma Baba just because he's sitting in front of us, his image is in front of us. But that vibration and energy takes us inside ourselves too. So as I sat there, I thought about his story in a sense. An ordinary man, once upon a time, an ordinary young man born to a teacher whose father was a teacher. And he lived just in a village in Karachi, in that part of India, which is now part of Pakistan, Sindh community. And he grew up like any other little boy, just an ordinary boy. And his father was a teacher. But his father brought him up to be someone of great integrity and honesty and commitment. And the story that we've heard from, that was told by Brahma Baba, that he was quite a religious man, as an adolescent young boy. He was quite religious, wasn't really interested in mundaneness of life. And he relates his experience of going to see a movie, and it is there that he had the thought that he should get married. Until then, he didn't have interest in getting married. Anyway, life, society, all of these things kind of dictate to us often what our life should look like. So Brahma Baba, or at the time he was called Lake Raj in a Sindhi community, so he was married and had children of his own. He became a businessman, had a jewelry shop, and in fact he was a jeweler, a very highly qualified jeweler. He made himself into a highly qualified jeweler, such a refined jeweler that in those days, in the days of British Raj, the British as well as the rulers of India would go to him specially to have him make his jewelry. But he was known as someone with a lot of love and respect and gentleness and kindness in his community. Because he was quite well off as a businessman, he had servants, but his servants didn't feel like servants, but his servants too felt like they were his family members. This is the kind of character he was. And he had 3 daughters, I think, 2 daughters and a son, or 2 sons. No, 1 son, sorry, 1 son. But as he became well known in his community for his integrity and for his refined work, people would always look out for him and had a tremendous amount of, held him in that very high esteem. This was his life. This was his life of helping other people, life of supporting others, very charitable, lots of religious interests. He had 12 gurus. He was very devout Hindu and so interested in scriptures, reading the Gita on a regular basis. This was his life. And one day, he even said to his wife, "We should now retire." Or his wife said to him that that they should retire. As you know, in India, at the age of around 60 or just around that time, you retire. In those days, in the late 1800s, you retire and you go and live in an ashram. But he didn't feel that he wanted to do that. He still wanted to continue to run his business as efficiently as he knew how. Anyway, the story is a very long one, but he found himself drawn to more and more silence. He found himself becoming interested in more reflection, and he would write diaries, he would have dialogues with his mind and his personality and his character to make a connection with himself, a deeper connection with himself. And this happened in his early 50s, in fact. And years went by and he continued that practice, and he would spend a lot of time in silence. And then he became drawn to a deeper state in which he felt that he had to be something other than what he was. During this period of silence, he began to have visions of a new world, visions of this old world coming to an end, visions of the pain and sorrow and the suffering of today's world. And in those days, how many years ago? Maybe 150 years ago, something like that. Those visions would have been visions. Nobody really thought about it. And nowadays, I was listening to something earlier on today. Everybody talks about how much suffering there is in today's world. how distressed people are. While economically, in a sense, we seem to have much more money than there used to be. Even 50 years ago, even when I was growing up, there's much more money in our world today. Even with crises that occur, our standards of living improve, and yet people find themselves in a lot of distress. Money can buy anything. Money can buy a lot of things. But money can't buy a happiness that you can deeply be satisfied with inside your own self. Anyway, he had visions of these things, and as a result, he became quite distressed. But you know, it's people who make a difference in the world. There are some people who from a very young age have this awareness that they've got to do something powerful, something different, make a difference in the world. They have that inspiration from a very young age, and they make themselves qualified for that inspiration. Then there are those who don't have their own inspiration, in a sense, but inspiration is given to them. They find themselves in a position of playing a part, playing a role that they themselves had never imagined that they would play. Something, twist in the drama, twist in the tale of the world, if you like, that makes them be in the right place at the right time in the right way. And then there are those who make a lot of effort, work very hard to qualify themselves, to get ready to be able to make a difference in the world. But Brahma Baba was the one in the middle, who actually was going along in his life like everybody else. Didn't have the inspiration that he would find an organization like this. He just had love for God. He just found himself being pulled to God. And in that phase of his life, he found himself truly being inspired, and perhaps even an instrument. And in that phase, he found himself in this silence, but in this silence, ideas and thoughts and inspirations that would come to him were totally alien to him. He didn't know where they came from, what they were to begin with. He would go in silence and he would draw circles. He would draw swastikas. He would draw symbols. And he himself had to go deeper into silence to give meaning to these symbols. And he found himself teaching, explaining, and sharing. Thousands of people. Well, at that time, not thousands. We are thousands now. In those days, people just gathered around him to listen to him. But this is one aspect of becoming an instrument to share something immensely powerful. You know, India is a land of lots of philosophies and religion and rituals and worship. So there's always been a lot of all of that in India. But here's something very different. Whereas Brahma Baba was not teaching rituals. He was not teaching worship. He was not teaching to read the scriptures. But actually, he was teaching quite the opposite. He was teaching to go inside yourself. He was teaching to go into silence. He was teaching. I use the word teaching, but not just teaching verbally. He was sharing by being. He was inspiring through his words what he was experiencing inside himself. And in this state, people came to him and had visions. People had visions of themselves in a very high state of consciousness. You know, nowadays we have so many books and so many personal development trainings that actually teach us how we can be bigger than ourselves, Whereas Brahma Baba gave that experience to those people in front of him as to how to arrive at or gave the experience of what it is like to be in a very high, elevated state of consciousness. He gave them the experience first by being that himself, and then he explained how they could do that for themselves. You know, today, some of you might have seen on BBC, there is this series that's just starting about icons or legacies. I forget the title now, Legacy Icons. And they're going to have different types of people who've been pioneers, but also created shifts in our world that could never have happened without them. And I think the first episode was more political leaders who are being spoken about, and their life and how they became those political leaders who created paradigm shifts in our world. And those people, there are so many important people who have done amazing work in the world today, whether it's Mahatma Gandhi or Martin Luther King, or whether it's Nelson Mandela. All of these people did amazing work. But there's one thing that happens after they move on. They create a shift, but when they're gone, everything goes back to how it was. So inspirations are there when those people are present. And they are able to galvanize the energy of the people through their inspiration, through their vision, and through their words, which is very powerful. They create those shifts, but people themselves only retreat into their own ways of being afterwards. And this was something unique about Brahma Baba. Brahma Baba inspired and encouraged those people that were in front of him. And actually, the people that came in front of him were families, men and women, but very young children. Very young children. And these young children, he gave them the realization of how great spiritual leaders they would be when they elevate their consciousness. When they make their consciousness so high through the awareness of themselves as spiritual beings, as the children of God, in perfect image of God. And they, for 14 years in the beginning, he personally spent time. He personally guided them into deeper meditations. He personally taught them how it is they can change themselves from thinking of themselves as ordinary human beings to elevated divine beings. Beings that we know as devtas. But what that life would look like in today's world, where the integration of spirituality and the physical life, all of us, perhaps not me, you might say, because I actually live in a spiritual place. I live in a spiritual community. And I suspect most of you live in your own homes and your families. You have jobs, you have businesses, you have commitments and responsibilities. You have to fulfill all of those, and yet still live a deeply spiritual way of life. This is something that Brahma Baba inspired. That especially in India, you have two schools of thoughts. There are those who think that if you want to be spiritual, that's it. You've got to become a sannyasi. You've got to leave everything. You leave your family, your children, your wife, your business, whatever it is, and you go and become a sannyasi. Become a renunciate. That's the way to become spiritual. Your responsibility, you create it, but someone else can look after it because you decide to be spiritual. And then there is the other school of thought where you engage so fully that engagement in itself is to be spiritual. What would you say? Both seem too extreme to me. What I found inspiring, I may not have a business and a family and a responsibility in the way that you do, but my responsibilities and commitments are equally, to some extent, mundane. I have to cook and clean and wash and meet people and greet people and do things that all of you do. It may not be just for a few people, but I have to do the same thing. But it's about integrating this consciousness, integrating our spiritual, subtle consciousness of ourselves as pure, divine, unconditional, spiritual being into this world that doesn't seem so divine, that doesn't seem so unconditional, that doesn't seem so giving. Everybody is out to get what they can. Everybody's trapped in a sense and caught up. And yet how to be able to live in this world and yet keep our consciousness so subtle, so clean, so giving, that everything we do, everything we think, everything we say, everything we do always becomes an expression of who we really are, of sharing and of giving. Because ultimately, human nature is not selfish. Human nature is benevolent. Human nature is of giving and sharing. Human nature is actually quite unconditional. When we think of ourselves as souls, as Atma, then in that awareness, what are you? Who are you? In that awareness, when you can think of your body, think of your senses as tools. These tools that actually you use to relate to the world outside of you. Then you're not compelled by them. And this is the integration that Brahma Baba was deeply inspiring in everyone. And also a very powerful inspiration, I think, Brahma Baba, and legacy that he left behind. He created this sense of a family. You know, Brahma Kumaris is a big organization. And now that we've become so big, we have the GDPR and we have health and safety, and we have all of these. We live in this world, so all of these rules and regulations that we have to follow. But yet, spiritually, we're a family. Organization is represented in 120 countries. And so there are people from all cultures and backgrounds and religions coming to learn some of these universal spiritual ideas. Why? Because Brahma Baba truly inspired this consciousness that all of us are the children of the one supreme being. Doesn't matter where you come from. Our hardware is different in a sense, because we've all been brought up differently, but the intrinsic nature of the human spirit is the nature of peace, is the nature of love, is the nature of joy. And that we are this, irrespective of what might be outside of us. We come to places like this to remind ourselves of this. And when we can tap into this, then we create this integration in our lives. And that's when our lives, I think of, this is the fundamental role that Brahma Baba played. This role of being an instrument to translate deeper spiritual truths of ourselves into this everyday life. And they are learnt and lived by maintaining this awareness and practice. And you know, God, who is God? What is God? We, especially in India, are very good at creating images and worshipping images, and that's great, has its own purpose. But if you were truly to ask yourself this question, if you had to define God without a physical description, if you had to define or give language to the nature of God, how would you describe it? Unconditional, love, benevolence. One thing that is unique about God, and that is that God never changes. Always remains the same. Always unconditional, never judging, never discriminating, never biased, but always the same. Think about it for a moment. Always the same, never changing. And if we were to be that, never changing, what would your life look like? If you are always giving, unconditional, what would your life look like? What would the world look like? Would we have the situation and the problems that we have in today's world? Brahma Baba encouraged this kind of integration. Not just encouraged, but inspired very powerfully. And you know, what is very unique about these people who have this incredible ability to inspire us is that they have a vision. But a vision that is a reality for them even before it becomes a reality. Do you know what I mean? Their vision that is in the future is a reality for them today because of their own power of conviction and faith and love and the sheer intention to make that vision a reality. It may not be physically a reality today, but their vision is so great that to them, that vision is reality. And that requires courage. When you're in a situation, when you have that kind of a vision, it is as if the whole world is against you. But one never lets go of that vision. One is never able to let go of that vision. And that vision is so powerful that actually you give a vision of that vision to other people too. Brahma Baba had such a vision, not necessarily of creating an organization, an institution like this, but he had a vision. And the vision that he had was to create heaven on earth. And not just a vision of heaven on earth just in his head, but that it is possible for all of us collectively to transform this world when we become so committed to truth and to spirituality. And people who live this kind of inspiration are the people who are able to go beyond themselves. They're able to get themselves out of the vision, out of their way, in such a way that they're able to do whatever is needed and be whatever is needed to make that vision a reality. They're always bigger than anything else. And it's, everybody actually wants to be bigger than themselves. And this inspiration is very powerful, that I can make a difference, that I can do something important to be able to bring a world of peace, a world of love, and a world of joy. And I'm just one individual, but that doesn't matter. The power of, and Brahma Baba, why Brahma Baba? Well, he passed away in 69. And he had these inspirations in the late 30s. Imagine, now we're in 1920s? Nearly. 2019, we're in 2019 now. And all that time, so he wasn't thinking, well, I'm not going to see this in my lifetime, so I might as well give up. But he knew that all those that were to come after him would be able to be part of that vision. And so, all of us, why do we do what we do? Do we do to see the results today? But the power of spirituality is so great. In Bharat we have this notion of the Pandavas and the Kauravas, right? That there were 5 Pandavas and 100 Kauravas. The 100 Kauravas had all the armies of the world and the weapons of the world. And the Pandavas, what did they have? Only God, only Krishna. And this war between these two groups of people takes place. There's only the 5 Pandavas and Krishna. Why? Ultimately, we all know who gained victory, and it was the Pandavas. Why? Because the power of spirituality is greater than any other power, because it's incredibly subtle. And we are that spiritual power ourselves. And as we become aware of that, as we become concentrated in that awareness, we manifest everything that we think and feel inside ourselves. And that's why the power of spirituality is the greatest power. So 5% of the population of the world needs to be spiritual. That's all. But truly spiritual. Not compromisingly spiritual. Not when it suits me, or when it works for me, and the way it works for me. But the specialities, the uniqueness about these pioneers is that nothing gets in their way. And while Brahma Baba had the whole of his community against him, the local laws and the justice system was against him. Because here were people coming to listen to him who were becoming empowered. The legacy that Brahma Baba leaves behind is that we don't have followers in the Brahma Kumaris because we don't have a guru. Brahma Baba himself was not a guru. So we don't have a guru. We do have older sisters and older brothers that we have respect for. Because they're experienced, they're wise, they know, and they can guide us. But they're not our gurus. They never were. Brahma Baba himself was not a guru. Brahma Baba, an incredibly humble person, ordinary like everybody else, wouldn't accept garlands. And you know how big garlands are in India, right? I don't mean in terms of size, but how important they are. Everybody gets a flower garland. Brahma Baba wouldn't accept that. Brahma Baba would say, I am your brother. I too am on a spiritual journey like you. You don't need to give me flowers. You don't need to touch my feet. In fact, you don't need to touch anybody's feet. Imagine that. Not because you don't respect them, but because you learn to stay in your self-respect. Why Brahma Baba created leaders in those days, these young girls, 15, 16 years old, that came to him. he said, you are the future of the world. You are the future guides and teachers of the world. And they were 15, 16, or even as young as 9 and 10. And it's true. Today, 80, 90 years later, they are in their 80s and 90s and 100 even. And they are the spiritual teachers that he had visions of at that time. But the important thing here is spirituality is not that which makes me subservient to anything, nothing, and no one. True spirituality enables me to have respect for my own self and also teaches me to have respect for other people. This is what Brahma Baba taught. And so why it is that Brahma Kumaris don't do rituals and worship, not because we don't have respect for the deities, but because we are learning to become the same, have the same elevated consciousness. Because what is bhakti actually? What is devotion that Brahma Baba didn't encourage? Bhakti and devotion is to give power to something outside of yourself. Anything. Good or bad, doesn't matter. If it's good, and you, even then, you lose yourself in it, you've lost yourself. If it's not good, if it's bad, and you still lose yourself in it because you're thinking 1,000 times about what's not right, that too is a form of bhakti. And bhakti we don't do of just devtas. We do bhakti of people. We do bhakti of ways of life. We do bhakti of money. We do bhakti of our health. Anything that I give power to over myself becomes a form of bhakti. And Brahma Baba said, you don't need to do that. You're a child of God. You're the children of God. And so your power is great. Rise to the power that you are. And then share that power with others. And this doesn't mean ego. There is a vast difference between ego and self-respect. Brahma Baba had a huge aspect of value and respect for himself, but he was incredibly humble. Humble that he always said, the children first. The young ones that come nowadays, they're so smart. They know so much. And if we are the ones who keep holding everything, where is our world going to go? You have to put the young ones in front. You have to get the young ones to be inspired to make a difference. And so, all of these different aspects, Brahma Baba said that spirituality is not something that you can attach a price tag to. It's very easy in today's world for people to put their hand in their pocket and give money for this and money for that and money for the other, and then you think you've done your bit because you paid for that and you paid for that and you got your money's worth and finish. Spirituality, Brahma Baba said, you can never charge for it. Doesn't matter where you are, which part of the world, in which time zone you live in. But spirituality is not something you must attach a price tag to, i.e., don't charge for what you share with other people. That's why you come here, nobody asks you to pay anything. There isn't an altar where you can put some money because you've come to a mandir. But here, what you are going to be asked to do ultimately is take responsibility for yourself. Ultimately, you are going to, you get nothing. Nothing comes for free, right? So you may not give in terms of money. You may not give in terms of anything physical. But your conscience, you are receiving this understanding. Ultimately, all human beings are truth. All human souls are beings of truth. And ultimately, we all have to face that truth. We all come in front of that truth, but the truth is the truth of ourselves. So opportunities to come to places like this, or any place, spiritual place that allows you to think deeply, to connect with yourself and with God. Ultimately, the price is to look in the mirror of your own self and be true to your own self. That's the price. There's no other price to pay here. And another Brahma Baba's legacy is Brahma Baba said that spirituality can't be taught by saying, I know and you've got to listen to me. It can't be taught by saying, I've got this degree and I've got these scriptures that I read, and so I'm Shri, 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 and you have to listen to me. Because nobody will. Spirituality is something that has to be nurtured in people. Spirituality has to be taught by example, by creating the same vibration and energy that you want to share with other people in your own self. And when you do that, then actually the more you begin to do that, the less you have to say anything. And we, as the Brahma Kumaris, have been talking for a long time. But now I think we've come to a point where we have to stop talking too. Perhaps say a little, but perhaps reveal a lot more through our being, through our experience. Because ultimately, there's nowhere else to go, no place of solace except the spiritual place. A place where we can experience our own deeper sense of peace, compassion, kindness, love, and giving. Well, I could go on, but I won't, because it's already 8 o'clock. So I'd like to perhaps just throw it open for a few minutes, if anybody wants to ask any questions or comment. Or thoughts?
Yeah, I'd like to say thank you for today's talk. It's been very touching. I'd like to thank you for today's talk. It's been very touching, so thank you for that this evening. And I would like to ask, when you mentioned when we give power to something over ourselves, I think you said that's bhakti, isn't it? So, I mean, what does that mean exactly? Would you say when you give power to something over yourself?
What I mean by that is when you lose yourself in something else, where in a sense you lose your own identity and your own self and your own mind and your own intellect in something else to such an extent that as if you can't think for your own self anymore. So, in people, when you idolize people, let's say, you idolize nowadays football players or movie stars or Bollywoods or Hollywood or whoever, whichever stars, when they become your heroes, and yeah, they might have certain qualities that are inspiring, but when you consider them to be something so great that you can't be, that becomes a form of devotion where their images are in front of you, you're thinking about them, you're reading about them. That's one example. Another example is where sometimes let's say health, actually that's another one. You become so compulsive about your physical well-being that, you are constantly worried about what you're going to eat and what you're going to drink and how you're going to eat it and what its effect it's going to have on you. So you're thinking constantly about eating or, managing your health. It also becomes a kind of devotion that you lose yourself and your ability to discern, your ability to discriminate, your ability to judge situations for what they are lost. And we do this in many different ways. Whereas the ability to be able to see something for what it is, create separation between yourself and it, and see it, be objective, and then apply yourself. And this ability to be objective comes with a practice of silence, of meditation, of what we call soul consciousness, of being able to connect with God. And now when I'm talking about being objective, it's not just about the world, but even your own people that you're so close to, that actually you lose your objectivity because you're so attached and you want them to be in a certain way, you want them to do something, and when they don't, you lose your own inner peace. So this ability to have this relationship of being able to move in when you need to, move out when you need to.
So when you say yourself, you mean you're coming from the soul perspective, aren't you, from Atma?
I'm coming from the soul perspective, but even as an individual, you lose yourself in someone else. But yeah, as an individual, to lose yourself means lose connection with your deeper self. Yourself as a spiritual being, as a soul.
Thank you for that. There's lots to think about there.
Lot. Yes. Ek minute, Madan bhai. Microphone. Here, up front.
Manda Ben, to my really surprise, you have gone through the subject in a way that you leave us very little to come up with a question.
No, it's always good to question. It's always good to ask a question, because it's important. When you ask a question, then you are stirring something up inside yourself. So it's always good to ask questions, especially when you think, why? Why do I feel like this about this? Anyone else? No? Okay, let's have a few minutes of meditation together. And also, actually, what I want to say is that a place that's very close to the hearts of the Brahma Kumaris and Brahma Kumars is Madhuban. Madhuban means the forest of honey, a place which is the headquarters of the Brahma Kumaris. And there's the original Brahma Kumaris center or ashram, Madhuban, which is in Mount Abu, Rajasthan. And if you ever go to India and go to Rajasthan, definitely you have an open invitation to visit there. But Brahma Baba spent all his time there. Brahma Baba moved from Karachi to Hyderabad, and then from Hyderabad during the Second World War, when the partition took place between India and Pakistan. They all moved from Pakistan to India, and they moved to Rajasthan, Mount Abu, which is a hill station. It's a beautiful place. When I went there in the early 80s, it was a very small village. And I think I saw about 4 or 5 cars. But now, the place is full of cars and full of people and tourists and so on. But still, the Brahma Kumaris' main original ashram is there. And Brahma Baba spent 25-something odd years there. It's a place that's very close to our hearts, and we go and visit there. And there are specific places that Brahma Baba spent time. And those places are places where one was his room, which we call Baba's room, a meditation room, which is we create everywhere in our centers. And then there was a hut that he spent a lot of time in the summer days when it's very hot in India, as you know. Huts are a little cooling, so he used to spend time there, and he used to meet people there informally. And then there was a room where he taught, which was like a classroom. So it was a formal situation, which was called the History Hall, where you get to see all the different images of Brahma Baba now that are kept there. And then there is the fourth place, which is called the Tower of Peace, where finally, when Brahma Baba, on the 18th of January 1969, moved on to that higher dimension, after that, 2 or 3 days later, where his body was cremated, we have his memorial there, which is called the Tower of Peace. These are the places that we like to go and visit. And in fact, here, they have replicated those places. And I think that even here, when you go to those places, you feel the vibration and the energy. So if any of you want to visit these places, I think the ushers will afterwards show you those spaces, and you can go and spend a few minutes there. And it's really about we don't want you to worship Brahma Baba. You don't have to do anything like that. But what we would just recommend is just sit there in silence, quietly, and just allow your heart to be touched by the vibration and the energy that has been created in this space with a lot of love. And all of us go to those places with the memories that we ourselves have of spending time in Mount Abu. So if you want to, you're very welcome to do that. And the month of January means that here we spend more time in silence. And I don't know if there's any specific time people can come if they want to come, but I'm sure reception can give you more information about that. Is that okay? Is there any other information? So let's just sit quietly. I'll speak out some thoughts to guide your thoughts. I've requested that we don't have any music because I don't think it's really necessary, because all of us together create a very powerful vibration and energy. Sit comfortably and relaxed, but alert. Meditation doesn't mean to kind of sit floppy so that you doze off, because meditation means to become alert, to energize yourself, but also allow your whole being to be absorbed and lost in the experience of silence, in the experience of this invisible, subtle energy. It is so subtle that actually, if you blink, you might miss it. So don't blink. Keep your eyes open, rested in one place. And just, first of all, breathe comfortably and deeply. And watch your breath as you take a deep breath. Watch your breath travel all the way down into your stomach, and your stomach expands. And as you exhale, notice breath come up all the way from the stomach, up your chest, and through your nose. As you breathe in this way, breathe now with a thought of peace. In a sense, a thought of silence. And notice the energy of your breath change. You become mindful of this energy, and your breath becomes soft. In fact, you sense a softness in your whole body. Soft, gentle awareness. Notice that as intensifying the experience of peace becomes apparent, you become so focused and absorbed in that peace. You begin to appreciate who you are and what you are in this state of peace. You appreciate your fortune of being here at this time, in this moment, and in this vibration, and in this energy. How lucky. This is who I truly am. I am this peace. I am this image of fortune. And this automatically makes me light. Almost as if my entire body becomes filled with light. As if the presence of God and God's light becomes apparent to me, around me, with me. And the experience of light becomes even stronger, as if my whole being becomes light. And this light, this might be an unfamiliar experience, but it is an experience of certainty that this is who I am. Light, peace, and deep love. Everything is good. Everything is just the way it is. The lesson that every scene that I pass through is just a scene. And as it passes, it finishes. Brings me to a place of peace. As I keep breathing and noticing my breath, I ground this experience of light here, and I become the presence of love. As if I'm totally in alignment with who I am and my life. Whatever it may be now, I know that it will always be just right. And everything will always be okay. always. And I just need to hold that vision now and forever. Because I am light, this translucent energy. This energy is living, thinking, conscient energy. And when I'm in this place, I am safe. Nothing can hurt me. I lose myself in this silence, but actually I lose what I have become, but I return to what I truly am, the presence of peace, energy of peace. Energy of unconditional love. Because what I always have to give is love. It doesn't cost me anything, because I am that. Let's stay here, still, silent, in the presence of God. Our love and our light can fill this room, but it can also fill the world. Om Shanti. Thank you for your presence, your attention, and your willingness to be open. Thank you.